Have you ever been in a place in your life when you felt like you needed God the most? I mean, you were really reaching out for God, and it seemed like it was the hardest for you to sense or to know that God was near you, or that God was around there, or that God was even listening to you. And your thought was, and probably maybe some of us have even said it out loud, where is God when I need Him? In your heart, could you say, that's probably been me? There's been times that's where I've been. I've been up against something. I've been in a battle. I've had enemies, the spiritual enemies, powers of the air attacking me, or I've been in situations at work, and you say, well, God, where are you? Where are you? I'm yours. I'm your child. Help me. Well, in the first chapter of Habakkuk, starting with verse 1 through 4, here we find Habakkuk, and basically that's what Habakkuk is saying here. Is God, are you really listening to me? I'm calling out to you. I'm in need. Are you really listening to me? Let's read that. I'm going to be reading from the Message. It puts it in a little better place for us to understand. It says, the problem, or we could use the word burden, as God gave Habakkuk to see it. God, how long do I have to cry out for help before you listen? He just said it. You know, sometimes I think we need to just be honest with God and just let God know, God, I need help. Well, help. Let it hang out. That's what he was doing here. How many times do I have to yell, help? Murder the police. I like the way it says that. Help, murder the police. I used to be on the Three Stooges. That's all right. But anyway, before you come to rescue, why do you force me to look at evil? Why am I at a place and I've got to look at this evil stuff around me, this thing that's attacking me? Stare trouble in the face day after day. Anarchy and violence break out, quarrels and fights all over the place. Law and order fall to pieces. Justice is a joke. The wicked have the righteous hamstrung and stand justice on its head. Wow. He said it for us sometime. I mean, if we could say it, we'd say something probably very similar to that at times. Here's what he's saying. He says, God, where are you? Why aren't you speaking to the issue? I need you here right now. Why don't you do something about this? And you think, well, I've been praying and I've been praying. How long can I pray the same prayer over and over? You ever thought that? How long? I just keep praying. How long can I pray this prayer? How many times do I have to pray this prayer? We may feel like God never hears us. I've been in that place. I've been in a place in my life where at times I thought, what have I done that God would not listen to me, that God would not hear me? But I want to tell you, God always hears us. He always answers our prayers. He does. Let me give you this morning 4 ways that God may answer us. Number one is this. The first one is this. When we call out to Him, are you listening to me, God? This may be what He says. Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? This is God speaking. Are you talking to me? In other words, what He's saying is, I'm not listening. I'm not listening. We had a little boy in our daycare. His name was Rod Pod. You heard me mention him a lot, but he was always an encouragement to me because of his personality and the way he did things. He was just who he was. Little round guy, sort of stubby and stuff. And he, one time he was in the room and the teacher was talking and stuff. And I don't know what happened. I come walking by and I was watching the teacher there with him. And all of a sudden he just jumped up and looked at the other guy that was there. And he said, he put his hands over his ears. And he said, nah, 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 nah. I'm not listening to you. And I was thinking about that this week. And I picture God, and maybe with all of his angels up, and we're up there and we're calling out, God, where are you? What's going on? And God's got his hands over his ears, and he's going, nah, 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 I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening to you. Why would God not listen to us? Why would he not listen to us? Why does God not listen sometimes? He hears us, but he doesn't listen. He knows, but he doesn't listen, okay? Why? Because he won't listen. Because he won't listen because of sin. Because of sin, he won't listen. You mean, Pastor Doyce, you know, if I have sin in my life and stuff and I'm crying out to God and stuff, let me read you a scripture, Psalm 61:18. It says, if I regarded, this is the psalmist, probably David, he says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. He will not hear me. John 9:31 says, now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will, him he heareth. You say, well, Pastor Doyce, I feel desperate. I have sin in my life. I want to tell you something. There's one time he hears you, and that's when you cry out for mercy if you're a sinner. If you're lost and you're living in sin, he'll listen. He'll hear you, and he'll listen to what you have to say. And then when you come to that place in your life that you surrender to him, and then he'll come and say, okay, now what do you want? And he'll take that and he'll clean up what's inside us. So if there's sin in our life and we're calling out and we're not living right and we don't understand why God won't answer our prayers, it could be because of that sin. It is probably because of that sin. Why would God not listen? He's not listening because maybe he doesn't recognize your voice. That's why he's not listening. We went to SeaWorld, and I think I rode one ride. Didn't I ride one ride? Twice maybe, or once? Anyway, we got in line and rode a ride, and we were with some of our grandkids were with us. And we were standing in line and stuff, and we were having to go through this place like this. And Asher is Micah's next to the youngest boy. And he's sort of a Dennis Menace. He's always doing things and always busy and involved in things and paying attention and saying things and going places. And I looked in line and I saw him and he was tugging on this girl's hair in front of him. I thought, Asher, don't do that. And he tugged on this girl's hair. I said, Asher, don't do that. And he just kept tugging on it. And I said, Ash, I put my hand on the top of his head. I said, Asher, don't, and it wasn't Asher. It was some other little boy that was in line, and somehow I got past, and I reached out, and you know what? The guy standing in front of him wasn't Asher's dad either. He was about that tall, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was my grandson. He says, that's okay. He needed it anyway. So, but why did that boy not turn and listen? Because he didn't recognize what? My voice. You see, that's why God doesn't listen to us, because he doesn't recognize our voice. God's the same way with his children. He only responds to the voice that he recognizes as his child. As his child. So, sometimes it's like God's not listening. It's like God's not. Then there's other times that we come up and we'll say, we might ask God. Well, I'll give you an example. When I always prayed for my dad. My dad had Parkinson's. I was always praying for him. I was always praying that God would touch him and heal him and change him. I couldn't understand why he was in the condition he was in, because he had the kindest, the sweetest, the most understanding, the most compassionate heart of anybody I know. And it wasn't just because of him being sick either. It was something that God just put in his heart. And I couldn't understand why my dad would have to go through all this suffering, and he loved God, never heard him complain, never heard him blame God for any condition or anything he was in. He always did. He even told me as a young boy, Doyce, you may not understand, but someday you will. And I've told some of you here before, and today I understand that to a degree because I believe I'm part of that reason. Because I saw things in his life that were real. I saw the Christ likeness in his life, and it made a difference in me and spoke to my heart. But I can remember when I was in college, I thought, I'm with all my buddies, and we used to pray together, Roger and Dave Rowland and Phil Hawkins and Philip Perkins and Dave Messick. We would get together downstairs in the prayer, and we'd pray together. We'd all pray together. And one day I thought, well, I'm going home Thanksgiving. I'm going to take a bunch of these guys, and we're going to go anoint my dad, and we're going to pray for him, and he's going to be healed because of all the faith these guys have. And we've been praying together, and there's power there, and God's going to work. And so we went. And after church was over with, I got the pastor, Brother Arrington, was one of the ministers there. Brother Sanders was there, and they all come down there, and I said, okay, we're going to pray. I think we need to heal my dad, and I believe God's going to heal my dad. My dad come, and he sat on the front row, and all these guys got around, and the pastor anointed him. And I mean, it sounded like there was a war going on, just calling out and crying out, everybody praying and anointing. And I'm down there, and of course I'm crying and praying, and I thought, when the amen was said, I looked up and I believed my dad was going to jump up and run across, rejoicing and praising God. But guess what? I looked up, and saliva was running from his mouth, and his hand was shaking, and he was wiping the saliva from his mouth. And he was like this, and he was drawn over, and his hands were drawn. Nothing had changed. And I said, why, God? I don't understand. This is a prayer of faith. We prayed. I know there are people here that believe. I know there are. I don't understand what's going on. God, will you heal my dad? What did he say? No. Do what? No. God, will you, me and my wife, we're having trouble. God, will you fix my wife? Or the wife says, will you fix my husband? God says, no. Do what? No. God, I need a job, man. I've got to put food on the table. I have my job. I'm losing my job, and I'm not going to have a place to go. God, you answer me. Give me a job. I got to have a job. And God says, no. I say, Pastor Doyce, where are you going? I'm in bad health. I'm sick. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm miserable. I'm at a place where I just want to surrender and give up. And you say, God, will you? No. No. Sometimes God just says no. We don't like no, do we? We don't like no. I don't like no. Sometimes God says no. And you know what? We become offended with God when that happens. We get upset with God. And we'll turn away from God. Sometimes, do you just want to ask God, why do you say no? Why do you say no? God's reply might be, I have a purpose for that. I have a reason for this being this way right now. I have a reason. I'm using that, and I'm going to use that in a way for my glory. The Apostle Paul, in 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, verse 12, Paul speaking, he says, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me. That word buffet means to burden, to have opposition against. It even means, the word means like being beaten in the face. To buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. The Apostle Paul prayed 3 times for this buffeting to be taken away from him. But it wasn't. And he's saying here, it stayed with it. Why? So that I wouldn't be exalted. Maybe Paul, his personality, the way he was, maybe God had to, there was something that happened. There was a lot of speculation on what he went through and what caused this buffeting to him. Some believe it was his looks, because of being stoned and how it maybe disfigured him in the face. Some think it was his eyes, because when he was struck down on the road to Damascus. Some people think that it was his past. But what happened in his past, and maybe some of us, that's the buffeting that we have. In other words, before we got saved, Paul, before he was Saul, and he persecuted Christians, he was the one that would drop the cloth and say, okay, take his life. And maybe in his mind, he saw Stephen one day that he stood before because Saul was there, and he was the one that did that. And he remembered that, and he's been buffeted that because he's gotten saved. Sometimes those things are, but he says, that I might be exalted above measure. God basically, in a nice way, tells him no when he says, will you take this away? And in verse 9, God's reply to him was this, and he said to me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. I'm amazed at the songs that were sung. Blessings, that song, the words in there, and it talks about it, and how you take things that are suffering, and God takes that and does good with that. I like the way it says that in the Message. It says, because of the extravagance of those revelations, and so I wouldn't get the big head, I was given a gift of a handicap. A gift? How many would consider a handicap a gift? I know one man, we showed the video on here, I can't remember his name. I think he's British. He has no legs, just little stubs. He has no arms, just little. And he actually swims. He actually surfs. And because of his deficiency, because of his handicap, because of the way he was born, God has taken that, and he has a great testimony. You can find it on Facebook. A great testimony of how God, he even wrestled at times, would I ever be married? And God spoke to him and let him know, yes, you would be. You ought to see a picture of his wife. Would he ever have kids? You ought to see a picture of his kids. And he was able to continue on. But those handicaps didn't bring him down. Those handicaps did something for him and used him in a way that God wanted to. He says, to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Satan's angel did his best to get me down. What he in fact did was push me to my knees. No danger then of walking around high and mighty. At first, I didn't think of it as a gift and begged God to remove it. Let's get this in perspective. He has Satan buffeting him, and he says it's a gift. Three times I did that. And then he told me, my grace is enough. It's all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness. Out of our weaknesses, there's strength there. I believe Jay even made comment about that last week. Strength in that. Once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap and began appreciating the gift. It was a case of Christ's strength moving into my weakness. Now I take limitations in stride. And with good cheer, these limitations that cut me down to size, abuse, accidents, opposition, bad breaks, I just let Christ take over. And so the weaker I get, the stronger I become. So what God is really saying is this thing you hate, I love because it's keeping you humble. It's keeping you humble. Why does God say no? Sometimes he has a purpose for it. He uses it to do something maybe even inside you, your heart, something in your character that needs to be changed, something that you need to lay down. There's a sanctifying process, a sifting inside, and God uses things like this to sift our hearts and get those things out of our life, to purify us, and even sometimes give us direction Suffering is even a way that God directs us sometimes. God, will you take it away? The answer is no. You see, God cares more about our soul than He does about making us feel good. Now, that's love. Maybe some of us say, well, I'd like to feel good a little while. I'm with you. God's reply might be, because my no is better, much better, than your yes. My no is much better than your yes. I had a song that I liked so much, it had a great message. I even have the accompaniment track. I don't think I've ever sang it in church, but it's called Unanswered Prayers. Garth Brooks sang. I want to just read you a little bit of this, maybe more a little bit. Just the other night at a hometown football game, my wife and I ran into my old high school flame. And as I introduced them, the past came back to me, and I couldn't help but think of the way things used to be. She was the one that I'd wanted for all times, and each night I spent praying that God would make her mine. And if He'd only grant me this wish I wished back then, I'd never ask for anything again. You ever said that? If you'll just give me that, I'll never ask for anything else. She wasn't quite the angel I remember in my dreams, and I could tell that time had changed me in her eyes too, it seemed. We tried to talk about the old days. There wasn't much we could recall. I guess the Lord knows what He's doing after all. And as He walked away, and I looked at my wife, and then there I thanked the good Lord for the gifts in my life. Again, the song Blessings, the way it talks, it's the same type of thing here. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. There's things that we pray for that we don't realize what the outcome is going to be and what we're going to have to go through. But God knows. And so He cares enough about you with letting you go through all this and the pain and the suffering like this just because it's something that we think that we need or it should be. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Remember when you're talking to the man upstairs that just because he doesn't answer doesn't mean he doesn't care. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayer. What's your reaction when God says no? You think He's abandoned you? You think He doesn't care? Do you get mad? Or this week I was watching TV, and I went through one of those channels. Can't remember which one it was. But there was this frog, and he was sitting down on this stump like that. You know what I'm talking about. And he would swell up, and then he'd go down. And he'd swell up, and he'd go down. And I thought that sometimes that's the way we are. We just pout. And we pout against God. Or we'll pout against our spouse. We'll pout against people we love. But you know what? We'll pout against God too. We might not think of it that way, but we do. But God knows that. He sees that. Or we just abandon Him. I'll stop going to church. I'll just show Him. I'll show Him. Bible, I'll put that down. That sure hadn't helped me very much. Or praying. Did you know that God told Jesus no? His own Son? He told Him no. He did. Jesus is in the garden, the Mount of Olives, and He's praying. And His disciples have abandoned Him, and they've fallen asleep. And He's carrying this burden of sin. You know what? This week I thought, that was my sin. That's our sin. He's carrying the burden of the sin on Him. To the point that He sweats his sweat was as drops of blood. Sweat. Luke 22:44 says, and being in agony, He prayed more earnestly, and His sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Here Jesus is. He's under such a strain that his sweat or his tears as he's praying, this is blood running out. Matthew 26:38 says, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." He's praying this. "Nevertheless, not what I will, not what I want, but as you will and desire." That was his prayer. When God said no, he says, "Whatever you want, God. I surrender. I surrender to you." God was told no by King David. This was a man that was after God's heart. God even said so himself in the Word. He was after God's heart. After God's heart. God, there was a love there that took place. David's going to build this building project, and he wants to build this big house for God. In 2 Samuel 7:2, "Here I am living in the house of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." And here he's wanting to do this for God, and God says no. He tells him no. He does. He tells him that his son Solomon would build it. In 2 Samuel, what's David's response? What does he do? What does David do? He said, "What do you mean, God? I'm the one that's got this vision. I'm the one that, how come, God?" But he accepted that no. As a matter of fact, he starts praising God. He starts reviewing. He starts rejoicing in what God has done for him and his family. That's what he does. God told him no. King David went in, took his place before God and prayed, "Who am I, Master?" My Master God? And what is my family that you have brought me to this place in life? But that's nothing compared to what's coming. If you've also spoken of my family far into the future, given me a glimpse into tomorrow, my good Master, what can I possibly say in the face of all this? You know me, good Master, just as I am. You've done all this not because of who I am, but because of who you are. Out of your very heart. But you've let me in on it. You see, listen when God speaks. Even if you don't want to hear it, listen. Used to be a movie on TV, Father Knows Best. I agree, Father knows best. He does. God's no is always better than our yes. A lot of times people have a problem, and their problem is they don't want to be told no. They don't want to be told no. The third thing that maybe God's reply is, and we like this one. We like this one. God, will you? Yes. Yes. God, will you heal me? Yes. God, will you meet my finances? Yes. God, will you give me the grace that I need for another day, for the situation that I'm... Yes, yes. God, will you give me the strength to be faithful? Yes. I said yes, yes, yes. We like those, don't we? But there's two things I want to tell you about the yeses, and it's this that you need to consider. One is, most of the time, with every yes, there is an obedience. Just about every time with every yes, there's an obedience. A man in Mark the 3rd chapter with a withered hand. He's standing there, his hand's withered. What does Jesus tell him to do? Stretch forth. It was something that really in his flesh he couldn't do. He'd probably tried that many times before. Stretch forth. An obedience. But it was that obedience because he obeyed. Most people, I can't. I've done it, but I've tried before. I can't. Jesus said, stretch forth. You see. Yes, you can be healed. What about the man at the pool of Bethesda? Jesus told him to take up his bed and walk. Obedience. He took up his bed, and what at one time had him bound, he was carrying it. In Matthew, the 14th chapter, the disciples are in a storm, and Jesus comes walking on the water, and Peter asked Jesus if he could walk out to him. And what did Jesus say? Are you kidding? No, he didn't say that. He said, come. Come. And he did. And he walked on water for a while until he started looking at his own self and stopped looking at Jesus. So Peter comes and he walks on the water. You see, there's an obedience. When God says yes, there's an obedience to that yes. After every yes, and here's the second thing, and this is very important for us to remember. After every yes, be sure to say, thank you, Jesus. Always come back. Don't be like the 9 lepers that didn't come back. When God listens and God says yes, you say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you. The fourth and last one is probably the one we hate the most. It is me. And I probably in my life probably had to do that more than anything else. And his answer is, wait, not now. Wait. I just don't like that word. Lord, will you do this? Not now. When? Not now. I know, I heard what you said, but when? Not now. Well, when will you tell me when? Not now. You know what that sounds like? A father and a son. A father and a child, doesn't it? It is. Him and us. Him and us. Here's our problem, 2 Peter 3:8. But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. God's timing is different. When God tells you to wait, He always has a purpose behind it. God always has a greater purpose, usually when He calls us to wait. When we have to wait, there's a greater purpose that He has planned. And there's reasons for that. Jesus delayed when he got the message about Lazarus. He delayed. He didn't go right away. Lazarus has died. He's unto death. Jesus went on. He didn't go then. But you know what? A greater thing happened. He didn't just get healed. He was resurrected. And more glory was given to God. David, he was chosen to be king, but he had to wait. But if you read about it in history books and study in theology and stuff, Bible, is you realize that when we went over there, of all the kings that we're talking about, you know what? Everything was David. He was the one. Because what? He waited. He waited. And in that waiting, God used him in a way. Waiting. Joseph had a dream, a God-given dream. He had to wait. He had to go through all these things. But he waited, and one day that dream came into fruition. A great thing. That where he was at, he would have been in the wrong place, but he had to go through certain things, and he had to wait. He had to wait. Why? He had to wait because sometimes what God does in waiting teaches us. That's what it does, things that we need to know. I wonder what all of these people had to learn in there to teach before that thing came to pass. Teaches. One thing, I'll tell you, every one of them probably had to learn, is learn to trust. Learn to trust. And that's something that's hard for the flesh to do, is learn to just trust God. Another reason that we have to wait is because we're not ready. God wants to do something with us, and He wants what you want, but we're not at a place where God can do that with it. And He's waiting for us to get where we need to be, where He can do that with us. God will wait you out. He will, and I promise you He'll win. Sometimes the reason God waits is because others aren't ready. others aren't ready. I'm ready, and that's what's hard on us. I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's go. Let's go. I'm ready. But there's other people that are involved in this. They're not ready yet. They're not ready. Joseph's brothers weren't ready when he told them. After they waited, they understood why. Where is God when you need Him? Where is He? Gary Paxton says in a song, time after time I'd been searching for peace and some void. I was trying to blame all my ills on this world I was in. Surface relationships used me till I was done in. And all the while someone was begging to free me from sin. It says He was there all the time. He was there all the time, waiting patiently in line. He was there all the time. Never again will I look for a fake rainbow's end. Now that I have the answer, my life is just starting to rhyme. Sharing each new day with Him is a new cup of wine. And oh, what I missed. He's been waiting right there all the time. I asked the praise team or whoever to come up for this closing song. You know, when it seems like God isn't listening, He's there. When it seems like He's not listening, He's there. He's there. Well, even when God says no, and it just breaks your heart, He's there. He's right there. He knows where you're at. He's watching out for you. He has, like the psalmist says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I believe God has has goodness and mercy, and they are following us and hiding behind trees, trying to help us out. Goodness and mercy. When God says yes, He's there. A lot of times He says yes, and we get in more trouble with the yeses because we jump ahead and we don't listen to God along the way. We get the yes, and then that's all we get. He was there and is there. And even when He says wait, He is there. The song that was sung is, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Wherever you are, when you think that God is not listening, or whatever answer you get, if it goes against the grain, and you don't think He cares, or He doesn't understand, He's there, and He cares, and He understands, and He knows you better than you know yourself. He is there. You're not alone. Let's stand. If you would like prayer and feel like you need prayer, come kneel at the altar. Anyone